We have many founders come to us and they come and join our community, our accelerator, and our community at the early idea stage. And when we speak to founders who want to start a startup and have an idea, well, they tend to face some regular challenges, some struggles. For example, they've got so many things on their mind, such as pitching investors. I need to go get investors. How does this work? Paying for developers. Which developers should I hire? We've heard some horror stories. In fact, we were just discussing it before recording this about some horror stories about people paying for developers and not getting what they expected or paying far more than they wanted to. Some go out and they say, okay, I'm going to start learning to code. I've tried that myself. And that's not as easy. It's great when you're young and you got a lot of time and you can explore, but learning to code, a lot of founders try to do that. Finding co-founders, that's a regular issue always. How do I find co-founders? What sort of equity should I give them? What's the arrangement? And then getting customers. So many founders build something and they think, I built it. Now everybody's going to come and start downloading and using it, but they don't have customers. And so this whole concept, and this is the reason we're here today, and I'm very excited to share our guest and to have this conversation. I want to talk about what is an MVP. So what's an MVP? An MVP stands for a minimum viable product. Now, before I get into everything, I want to introduce everybody to Aliya Amershi. And I met Aliya just a little while back, and it has been fabulous to get to know her, her background. The more I hear, the more excited I get. And so today our discussion is going to be about how to bootstrap an MVP that validates your idea and gets customers without developers, investors, or marketers. That may sound very contrarian to what a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, techpreneurs may be thinking or they've been told, but we're going to poke some holes. We're going to shoot some sacred cows, if you will, and we're going to go after some of these, I guess, expectations or these norms out there that many founders are told. So I want to welcome Aliya. Aliya, thank you very much for joining me and participating in this. Great to have you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ed. I'm super excited to be here.
All right, well, let's jump right into it. So Aliya, who are you? And on your title slate, it said tech startup coach and founder at Code Free App Launch. Who are you? What's all that about?
Yeah, so I am a tech startup coach, and I help Bootstrap founders like launch their innovative app ideas and get customers without having to depend or spend on investors, developers, or marketers. And as far as myself and my background, so I'm actually a former engineer turned entrepreneur. So I've been in tech for over 20 years. I started coding when I was a kid. I worked at several Fortune 500 companies, such as Electronic Arts and Viacom Networks. And I built like multi-million-dollar products and apps and games as well. So I'm really well versed in the technology space. And then I got into entrepreneurship like over 6 years ago and started my first tech startup and faced all the challenges that everybody else faced as well. And then, learned a lot of lessons, finally was able to succeed with the first tech startup and then created my new business. And that's where I'm at.
And one of the things that really made an impression upon me was your mission. What is your mission with Code Free App Launch?
Yeah, my mission really is to help aspiring techpreneurs, anyone who has felt like underserved, underrepresented, underestimated in the tech startup world to really break into tech and build their innovative app ideas and bring it to market and show them that they too can be a techpreneur, even if they, are a woman in this space. Women are my primary market, but this is really open for anyone who doesn't feel like they're being served. So like people who are like people of color, people who don't live in the Valley, right? Or some major tech hub, people who never worked in this tech startup world, people who don't have a technical background, people who didn't go to an Ivy League school, older folks as well. Like it's not just for the 20-year-old like new graduates, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, right? So there's so many people that are underrepresented and being underserved. And so I want to help them get into this space. And the amazing thing is these people are interested. They want to break into this world, but no one's helping them. And like the way, they're not addressing the specific challenges they're facing. And so that's where I come in.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
What is the reason you think, in your experience, that there are underserved portions of the techpreneur population? Because you would think that, and obviously I've experienced this myself, but I'm kind of setting up the discussion. There's so many great people with so many ideas, total potential to be founders. But what's the reason the industry right now has gotten to this place where you would actually make it your mission to focus on underserved and underrepresented techpreneurs in this space?
Yeah, because a lot of the advice that's going around is really old school advice, and advice for people of privilege or people who are in the scale up stage, right? And I'm like, all of that advice is not helping, the rest of the 98% of us that are starting from zero, that have no idea about anything, that don't come from a place of privilege, right? And so, for example, these are some of the barriers that are holding people back. The barriers are, the advice that's being given is for telling people to pitch investors, with just their idea, which makes no sense because the numbers there, like maybe only 1% of founders get investments at the idea stage, right? So that's me, and they're being told to create these pitch decks and put together these financial projections for 5 years, which makes no sense when you're at zero, and create like all these legal documents. So it's actually pretty expensive to pitch investors, so there's that. And then they're being told, okay, well, you got to focus on the technology, and to do whatever you're talking about, you got to hire all these developers. And then that's like a costly, avenue that can be like 20,000, 100,000 or whatever. And then if that's not an option, then people are told, okay, well, then if you don't know how to code, or you can't hire developers, then you got to learn how to code. So then they try to go to coding boot camps, and that's like, a struggle in itself. And I'm just like, this is coming from someone like myself who did a computer science degree.
Sure.
I mean, to just keep up with like all the latest code and technology was, took a lot of effort. It was not like something I dabbled in and, did a coding bootcamp in 1 year. It's like an ongoing thing, right? When I was an engineer. So it's tough for people to just, learn code. It's like a completely different language. So there's that. And then, then they're being told, like, if they're not getting customers, it's like a marketing problem. So they need to hire marketing experts and like create ads and create funnels. I'm like, if you've launched and nobody's using your product, like this is not a marketing problem. Like you've got like a foundational issue in place, right?
Sure.
So all kinds of, I could go on.
Yeah. And okay, so let's highlight some of this, because you said so many great nuggets there that I think people are going to be watching this, especially, first time, really early stage founders are going to want to pay attention to. Yeah. So there's two types of advice, and I'm going to paint this out, and I think there's a big gap in the middle.
Yeah.
There's, I talk to founders on a daily basis, and I let them know, and I walk them through how Silicon Valley or how the whole startup space works. And they say, oh, that's not what people have been telling me for the past year. And I ask, well, who have been talking to? and they've been talking to like the rich uncle who's invested in real estate, or somebody who happened to, maybe get on the Uber IPO, day or something like that, or like supposed self-proclaimed experts that are giving horrible advice. Okay. So you got the one side there, and we won't get into that. But then you've got the advice from the startup community that is targeted towards that upper echelon, that elite level, who are either going to be scale-ups who are sitting and they have the potential to become unicorns themselves. And so that advice is, just all geared towards people that you say have privilege. But for me, it's like even the savvy people who understand the entire industry. And there's this gap in the middle of people who like, how do I even start or get into it, et cetera. And that's that gap that you are trying to serve right in that. That's what I heard.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's a huge gap.
Huge.
So, yeah.
And there are a lot of founders in there that can be really great founders if they're just given the chance. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So now here's what I want. And I'm pulling out the whiteboard because you said something so important that I think we need to really highlight.
Yeah.
You said, 1%, okay, get funded at idea stage.
Yes.
Okay, expand, because a lot of people are told, hey, if you just get an idea, this and that, you can pitch investors. That's how the way it worked on a napkin, et cetera. And so many founders start by saying, okay, I'm going to go get investment for my idea, and then I'm going to build my startup. Tell me about this.
Yeah, no, there's even some more stats I want to add to that, right? But that was maybe like at the idea stage, that was like, again, the advice from 10 or 20 years ago, like a long time ago, because at that time, there was not really that many, simple technology solutions for people to quickly build and test their ideas, right? So it required a lot of capital to build out whatever technology to test something out, in those early stages. But nowadays, that's no longer the case. And also in the investment world, because the bar has been raised so high, like most investors want to see startups generating at least $1 million in revenue nowadays before they invest, right?
Absolutely.
So, and then in addition to those stats, right, like the numbers are even worse for women. Okay. So for women, from all the funding capital that goes out at all stages, whether it be idea stage or scale up stage, only 3% of that capital is received by women founders. So that's horrible. And then less than, like, I think it's 0.02% is being received by women of color. And I think it might even be people of color, but definitely women of color. So those are horrible odds. And what's happening, this advice of like, and a lot of these programs that are out there, they're all like geared towards people creating their pitch decks and presenting their pitch decks. Okay. And that's like not going to move to, like, you're supposed to be creating a business, right? And you're supposed to be like validating your idea. And people are spending so much time on the pitch decks and pitching investors with abysmal odds. It's like, and it's also a very, discouraging process where it's tough, it's brutal. And a lot of founders will quit because that pitching process was so discouraging, when I'm like, you could have just tested your idea and start getting those customers and learn and just build upon that like really fast. So that's what I want to change.
You're absolutely right. The traditional prevailing advice, it comes from, the business world, like write a business plan. If you want to start a business, write a business plan. That's just not how startup works.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, I can tell you the soul sucking experience and the letdown, the heartbreak
Yes.
when someone puts so much work into a business plan and an investor's just not going to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
So you hit the nail on the head. Okay, so I want you
Yeah.
to keep hitting these nails. Okay, so you
Yeah.
have these you what you've identified old school rules and the
Yes.
top 5 barriers holding startup founders back. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to write them down, list them off for me.
Yeah, exactly. So the barriers are to like is pitching investors, right?
Okay,
On just your idea. Um, paying for developers,
okay, pay for developers.
right?
Pay for
Finding,
them.
yeah, finding co-founders. Um,
So that's advice. They say go find a co-founder.
yeah. And this is another thing. So I don't think I talked about this as much, but I'm going to mention this a little bit more, right? Like, you know, a lot of people don't realize, but a lot of startups start with just one founder.
Yeah,
And especially like when you're just in, like when you're at zero, right? Like, you know, yes, maybe a co-founder or a team can help when you're like in the growth and scale up stage, then you need more hands on deck, right?
sure.
But like when you're at zero, you can do it yourself. And that's number one. And number two, like what's cited as some issues that startup founders face is actually co-founder conflict, right?
Oh yeah,
And so I'm like, why it's like you're so just like building a business and building kind of a marriage within the business,
sure.
I'm like, that's just too much work. Just focus on building your business, validating your idea and whatever. So that's what I want to mention about co-founders. And then number 4 is like really trying to build the perfect app or perfect technology, right?
Okay,
So people are just too focused on an app, the app itself or the technology, their platform with all the like features and how it looks and all that sort of stuff. So they're pushing product as opposed to solving a real problem, right? So that's why I want to say about that. And then the 5th one is like paying for, marketers, right? And marketing in general. So many people are thinking if they're not getting customers like once they launch, they think, oh, they just haven't like seen, like enough people haven't seen their amazing product, right? And it's like the way you need to solve this is not spending more money on all these marketing hacks, funnels, systems, whatever. Like the way to solve that is like you gotta start talking with customers.
hmm.
And yeah. And so actually this well, first of all, if you had anything you wanted to ask about that.
Well, let me just point out.
Yeah.
So we're saying to founders out there, it's not that you're not going to be doing these things. Eventually, you are going to be pitching investors. Eventually, you will be able to hire developers. Go find a co-founder, right? Right in the beginning stages, it's one of the most expensive propositions. Like you're signing away, like co-founder, here's half my business before you
Yeah.
even, get things started. And
Yeah.
then you're absolutely right. The heartbreak, one of the main reasons I see startups fail is because the co-founder issues, then run in and they cause problems all across the board here. And then one co-founder says, I'm not up for this anymore. And then the whole business has to shut down because then how do you divide the startup, et cetera. And it's not to say you're not going to be working on technology. You're just going to accrue a lot of technological debt as you do this. There'll be
Mhm.
time, once you do what Aliya is saying, there's time that you will start to perfect your technology, make it better. And we're not saying you're never going to pay for marketing. You will pay for marketing, but at the right time. That's
Yes.
what we're talking about. It's a matter of timing and the most appropriate moment where you are best positioned for success versus how many founders, Aliya, tell me, how many founders have you talked to that have said, I just sunk, I lost 50,000, $100,000. We just spent $400,000 of our own money and we don't have anything to show for it.
Yeah.
How many times have you heard that story?
All the time. It's like a common problem. And here's some things. So like I probably chatted with like almost now 1,000 aspiring techpreneurs over the years, right? And these are the numbers, like just, anecdotal data, right? From what I'm saying, right? So people who follow these old school rules of all those things we just talked about, I would say like 80% never even get to launch, even if they spent 20,000, 50,000, 200,000, whatever, on developers to build their perfect technology, right? So they 80% never get to launch, okay? 90%, if they did get to launch or whatever, but like 90% never even get like one customer, okay? Like not even one, okay? And then I would say like 95% they don't even make $1, okay? And 98% don't even break the 10K mark, like just $10,000 in total, okay? This is, again, this is not like any official data, but this is from the data I have collected, and I've seen Anecdotal talking to 1,000 aspiring techpreneurs.
So 95 to 98% don't even make $1.
Yeah.
And then or over 10,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's scary.
These are really awful numbers. And then, and then there's some official numbers for women in business, right?
Sure.
So just women in business across the board, and the numbers are going to be worse for the tech startup world, but let's just say across the board. Like women entrepreneurs, 70% are in the poverty level. And we're talking about they're making $0 for years, and maybe 25,000 if they're lucky. So that's like 70%. 10% are above the six figures and above, 10% only, right? And then 2% of women break the 7-figure mark, So like these are pretty tough numbers, right? And so that's why, I'm on a mission to, stop having these aspiring techpreneurs like spend their life savings on all these other avenues that are not really going to move the dial, for their business. And I really just want them to just, start validating their idea, start solving a problem, start building relationships with customers, and slowly grow from there. Because what I say is these small steps leads to small, fast wins that compound over time and leads to big, lifelong success.
Wow, that's great. That's right. That needs to go on a t-shirt. Okay, but hang on a second. Let's go backwards here for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into your methodology and how you've helped found. How many founders have you helped already?
50 founders, over the years. And yes, I want to share. So I'm going to share like my story with my first tech startup.
Yeah.
Because it illustrates the methodology.
Okay,
right?
but before we do that, just take a moment, define for us, because we're going to be talking about MVP a lot. Yeah. What is an MVP to you?
Yeah, it's really like, a method or a product or a solution that can help, like the most simplest form of your product, the most simplified product that's also sellable, right? That's possibly sellable depending on what stage you're at, right?
Sure.
That allows you to collect the most amount of like customer data with the least amount of effort, right? So that's like really, what an MVP is. And people think, right? They mistakenly think, even myself, when I did my first tech startup, is that like an MVP is an app or a tech product with like less, right? With less features.
Gotcha. See?
Right?
Yeah. So, okay, wait. So let's just clarify. An
Yeah.
MVP is not necessarily your product with less features. Okay.
Exactly.
Now let me add my definition of MVP, and you tell me how it kind of coincides or whether you've got adjustments for it. So,
Yeah.
minimum viable product. The
Yeah.
MVP asks the question, what is the minimum amount of work that you can put in or invest to validate or invalidate your product?
Yes.
So if you can just put your MVP on a piece of paper and say, show it to someone and say, would you buy this? Type thing. That's a minimum viable product. It's not even a product itself. It could just be the promise of a product,
Yeah.
or it could be all sorts of different things that you do to somehow
Yeah.
prove or disprove, gather the data
Yeah.
on whether your product is going to be viable or not. So you're heading at least in the right direction. How'd I do?
Yes, exactly. That's great. And I just want to add to that, right? So I think what gets a lot of people stuck is actually the term product, even though MVP has that, right?
Sure.
But it's like really starting with solving a problem and getting the solution right.
Yeah.
And then the product is whatever, it ends up being is like a mechanism to help you deliver the solution, right?
Okay. Now
Yeah.
you talk a lot about finding problem solution fit. What
Yes.
is problem solution fit?
Yeah. So problem solution fit is really like, solving a painful problem, an important unmet need, right? And then solving it in a way, right, that is unique, where it's innovative, right? Introducing that, where there is some clear customer benefit and where that also differentiates from all the existing alternatives that are out there. So that leads into building like your value proposition, right? So you want to make sure, the main thing is you want to make sure, are you solving a painful problem for your ideal target customers? Okay, as opposed to pushing a product, just because you built it,
Okay.
So that's the difference, right? Solving a problem versus pushing a product. And so that's why I want to make sure there's that distinction. And what people don't realize, there's more than one type of MVP, okay? And so I actually introduced 3 levels of MVPs, and so the first MVP that I'm going to focus on to be able to help you get to problem solution fit is the Concierge MVP.
Okay.
And this is actually an official term from the lean startup. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not like that, right?
Yeah.
And I love the term concierge, right? Because if you think about it, it's, something that's like manual, more service-based, more of a white glove experience, more about really helping your customers and solving their problem, just like how a concierge at a hotel would do, right?
And you
So
don't even need technology to do this
yeah,
necessarily. Yeah.
you don't actually. So that's why it can be manual, or you can bring in very simple, super simple, no code solutions. And these are everyday solutions that people can use to test out things, like using like text messaging or WhatsApp or Excel spreadsheets or whatever, like so many simple things. So I want people to help. This is the switch that needs to happen, right?
Okay.
People need to stop thinking about product
Okay.
and start thinking about solving a problem.
Okay.
And that is the foundation, right? And solving a problem for the right customers,
Gotcha.
that, and that's all part of the whole product market fit pyramid. And actually, I think I'm going to show one slide here. So if you don't mind, I'll share my screen real
Sure.
quickly.
Please
Okay.
do. And then we want to get to your
Yeah.
experience and how you've proven this out, because I'm very interested. I haven't even heard this story yet. So
Oh,
once you
yeah,
show
yeah.
that, let's make sure we talk about your
Yeah.
success story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you see this? I have,
Yeah.
it's like the market fit pyramid, right? So you got to do, it's a whole bottom up approach. And so you just start with the customers and the problem and your unique solution, and then work towards the value proposition before you get into like the product, that traditional product that people think of, with the features and designs and whatever, right? So if you do this whole bottom up approach, then that's how you can succeed, right? But what's happening is that people do a top down approach, right?
Yeah.
And so they're focused on building this amazing app or whatever tech product, and they're focused on all the cool features. And then they think it's MVP. They're like, oh, we'll just take out some features and then it'll be MVP, right? And then
Gotcha.
and then they focus on the designs, and then they never ever even talk to one customer. They just go heads down building the product, and then they start pushing that product to the customers, onto the customers, and trying to do it the opposite way. And that's what leads to failure, because you're going backwards, instead of going the other way, like the whole bottom up approach to be successful.
Oh, Aliya, I know so many founders, if they just would have went bottom up, how many get caught going, and there's incentives to go top down if you're an app developer. And I'm not dragging our app developers. I'm not dragging the people, because, we need that. We need the dev shops and what have you.
Yeah.
But the financial incentive is to say, you need to build an app, you need to get all this right, et cetera. There's no incentive to sit with a founder and say, okay, going to help you with your ideal customers and all that stuff. There's no glory in it. There's no big paychecks, anything like that. It's hard work. It's in the trenches. And I love the way you systematize this. You're willing to get in the trenches with founders that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right.
Great.
So that leads me to my method here, which is the Silicon Valley Insider method, right?
Mm,
To keep things super simple. So it's really all about, the first thing everybody needs to do is to clarify their app idea. And here's another thing that I found whenever I ask somebody about their elevator pitch, is which is a mechanism that you can use to explain your app idea, your value proposition.
yeah.
And I would say 98% of people cannot even just do that. I'm like, if you can't explain your app idea in one or two sentences that's
Yes.
clear, and here's the thing, that a 5-year-old can understand, right?
Okay. Good
Right?
advice.
Why are you why are you spending tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars building a product when you can't even explain it?
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so that's the big thing. So this is why we start with this, okay? And then it's do a do-it-yourself no-code launch, right?
Okay.
And there's just, again, so many, like we just talked about earlier, you don't need any complicated code, and you can totally do it yourself, especially a Concierge MVP, because it can be manual and you can use just no code solutions like everyday apps and tools you're already using, right? So there's not even a learning curve. And so there's that. And it's just so that way that you can focus more on the solution as opposed to, oh, how do I build this, right? Because so many people get stuck in building, right? And they get so worried and whatever. I'm like, just don't worry about that. Just focus on solving the problem. And then that's all that really matters, right? And then the third thing is get happy paying customers. And to do that is, well, the first thing you want to do is really get happy customers, and then that will turn into paying customers. Okay. So it's build those relationship with customers, talk with them, see what their actual painful problem is, and then have them try out your your simple solution you've created, see if they love it, and then convert them into paying customers. It's really that simple. If it does not have to be complicated at all.
Okay, but hang on a sec. An interesting question popped up.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is out there, and so many founders are going to be getting the contrarian advice.
Yes,
Okay.
we
So
are.
tell me, how do founders, respond? Like when you're talking to people, they come to you and they're like, I want to build an app and I got an idea. I'm going to be a techpreneur. And you tell them, no, we're not going to do this. Like, what's the typical response? Because I can imagine people going, that's not what everybody else is telling me. What has happened? What's your experience and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, that is part of the challenge. But see, this is because what I'm doing in a way is innovative, and this is innovation. People are scared of something different. And I remember reading some stories like when like the elevator came out, like old stories, right? When the elevator came out and cars came out, right, from way back. Those were the innovations of those times. Like people were so afraid of elevators and cars,
Sure.
thinking they were death traps, So it's just like in people's nature, I guess, to be afraid of change, and that, but then that's kind of like also a sign that you are doing something innovative, right?
Interesting.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be innovative. They're like, oh yeah, I've heard and seen this before. You're just like, you're in the saturated market, like doing what everybody else is doing. So that's like even my own hurdle. But like, anyways, so it requires really just a lot of educating, right?
Sure.
And so that's why I created, as part of my sort of marketing now that I do, I have an educational video, like my masterclass.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and it explains like everything, right? And so the people who get it, then they will get on a call with me. And so, and I have that just really authentic conversation where I just talk about the challenges and problems they had, and they're having. And so they just want to feel understood. And so the more that you can understand and empathize with their problem, they have that trust. They're like, okay, this is different than what I've been hearing, but the main thing is like, you understand the problem. And so then they're willing to like give it a shot. And, if it's explained well, which, I've tried to do, then they buy into it.
I think that all the people who are going to be watching this are going to be very excited to hear that Aliya is going to be doing workshops with us. She's part of our community, office hours. You can take her courses, all that stuff. All that's going to be available. Don't worry. We're going to give you the contact information. You can get a hold of Aliya. She's very open, approachable. You can reach out to her. We've already connected her with so many founders, but let's talk about some of the success stories in your own journey, as well as working with the founders that you've helped.
Yep.
What's happened? Give us some
good
stories.
This is gonna be great. So I'll start with my own story, right? So like my first tech startup was a tech talent matching platform. Okay. And, I was, of course, naive when I first started, and I was thinking, I'm like, I'm going to compete with the multi-billion-dollar business, which is Upwork, right? So
Sure.
that was like my competitor, that I thought. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna make my platform like so cool. And having a tech background, I was, able to do that, and also bring on some developers and myself to build a really cool platform. And this was like before videos became a trend. When I thought my differentiator and why people will come to me is because my techies on my platform are going to have like little videos. So right, so I'm like, that will be the winner. Everybody's going to flock to me because that. And I created, it was really cool, I created these digital business cards with their videos for all of these techies, right? So I'm like, okay. So I had that, and so I had a product I launched. I had an amazing team. I had co-founders. I had the technical background. I had the pitch deck. I had business plans. I had the publicity, media. I had and I still do, but I had an amazing network of people, right? I have a good social media presence. Like every single check box was checked. Okay. And I totally failed. Okay. So Like nobody cared.
I love the way you're so open about it.
Yeah, nobody cared about this beautiful platform I created. And I thought I was solving a problem. Like, oh, people need tech talent, and I have all the talent, and they're all on the platform, like whatever, right?
Sure.
Um, so no investors were interested, no customers were using it, and like no money was being made. Okay. And so this whole thing was going on for a total of 2 years. Okay.
Wow. Two
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. So including the time like from when I started to like after I launched, right? So all of that, you know? So so then that was very heartbreaking. And then I had to just really take a step back. I'm like, there's gotta be a better way. And I really studied like the Silicon Valley methods and like really started to understand the lean startup, customer development, like the startup owner's manual by Steve Blank. And design thinking, like all of this stuff. And then I also, in addition to learning from the books, I invested in like my own coaches and coaching programs to learn also about, talking with customers and marketing and sales and all that sort of stuff, right? Okay. So like from the two different worlds, right? So I took all of that. I'm like, okay, let me just start talking with my potential customers for this first startup, right? So before, what I was doing, if anybody came in through social media or even the website and emailed and said, oh, I'm interested, whatever, right? Then I said, oh, just use my product, just use my platform. I wouldn't even talk with them, right? Which is what a lot of people will end up doing, right? And then, so then this time I just like decided to like, hey, okay, well, let's get on a call, right?
Sure.
So I just started talking with them and then I'm like, wow, the problems they're having, these non-technical business owners, non-technical startups that are looking for tech talent, is that they don't even know what tech talent they need, right?
Gotcha.
So there was that. So they had no idea, and they didn't want to, create like job descriptions. They didn't even know what to put in their job description, right? To find the tech talent. So I'm like, oh, well, let me help you out with that. Because so that was very easy for me. So I'm like, okay, well, I know exactly what tech talent you need, and you don't need to create a job description. And then so I like created, I was the concierge MVP. So I created this concierge service, and I was able to like match them with the techies from like, my bank of techies, and able to match them perfectly, like within the first match, like, well, 80 to 90% success rate with the first match.
Okay, hang on a second, because I think we got to highlight some key principles here. First, 2 years, and you ticked all the boxes, conventional, traditional boxes you're supposed to tick.
Yeah.
Not only was that going to be costly direct expense, but I think a lot of founders ignore the cost of opportunity, because for 2 years you could have been doing something else. And with your skills, your background, your credentials, you could have been making a lot of money doing something else.
And right? I was before making a lot of money as a software engineer.
Exactly. So cost of opportunity there. Then to your credit, you're like, it bombed. Nobody cares. You went and you researched, you invested more in your own education, which I think is phenomenal. But the reality is that, and this stings, is you could have done the concierge MVP matching to 89% success rate without having to gone through 2 years of building the product. That's the reality.
Absolutely. Exactly. And that's why I'm so passionate about this. I'm like, I don't want anyone else to be following like those wrong footsteps, like which is being told, which is being advised. Like I was told, nobody told me, right? Nobody told me, oh, why don't you just like talk with customers and figure out like what the real problem is and how to solve it in a unique way. Like nobody told me that. And I had to learn from reading the books and then just trying it out. And I'm like, oh, this is the way. So
this is the way. I love it.
Yeah. So, and then from there, in my third year, then I was able to like grow to like from 0 to 6 figures in sales in just 1 year. So that
Wow.
was like a huge, yeah. And I was able to get huge contracts. Like one of my largest clients has a $1 billion company, and they could have like gone with any sort of recruiter, the millions of recruiters that are out there, but because I was the only person offering this unique innovative service where I'm like, I don't need no job description and I know exactly what talent you need, and I matched them on the first candidate. So
Yeah,
that
so
was
now you have a
that.
choice. It's like on one hand, I could have a cool app and say I built a cool app that nobody uses. Or on the other hand, you just have a thriving business to making 6 figures.
Yeah,
And like I think that's a real interesting dichotomy that founders have to think about, right? For themselves.
absolutely. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be just this kind of service like business forever. Like I talk about like productization, which you talk about as well, right? So
Sure.
then you figure out the solution and you do it in a service like way, but then you start productizing it and you start what I like to call it layering in the technology. So
Absolutely.
yeah, bit by bit, I'm like, okay, what part can be in this whole flow, right? This workflow, what parts can I start like automating here? What parts can I start like incorporating technology to then work my way to make this a scalable product and solution, right?
But the novel insight that you got just
Yeah.
by talking to your users was the friction point of I don't want to fill out a job description. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't have been able to get that with all the technology in the world. You went out face to face, you found, like you said, that pain point,
Yeah.
right? And you came up with a unique way. I can solve that problem without a job description. Wow, that's got to be gold for the person on the other end.
Yes. Oh my God. They loved it. They're like, yeah, I'm like, I don't need anything. I knew how to ask the right questions,
Beautiful.
and then I systemized that, right? So I'm like,
Okay.
oh, then I'm like, I know how these are the questions I always have to make sure to ask. And then I created my own matching system or algorithm, whatever you want to call it, behind the scenes. So then I
Yeah.
was able to bring in the right techie. That's it.
That's the layering of the technology after. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So what are some other stories? I know you've got some good
yeah.
ones.
Yeah. There's so many interests, and so this goes to show the whole variety of like ideas that come in. It's such a variety. So one of my customers, she had no technical background whatsoever. She is a full-time working mom. She works in the medical industry, but during the pandemic, she wanted to create a fun solution for parents and kids who are stuck at home. And so she created a virtual talent show, right? and and the thing is, like, anybody else would have told her, oh, you would have all these cool features in whatever app. I'm like, she was able to like validate her idea just by simply using like creating a WhatsApp group and then people like recording the different, talent sketches that they were doing and uploading it to their iPhone and voting in the WhatsApp group. And that was a huge success. And she got raving fans within a week of launch. So like that cost her nothing. Okay. So there's that.
Okay, now
Um,
wait. What's
yeah,
important about that one is you don't have to market and convince people to download an app. Everyone already has WhatsApp,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
just it's such a clean, quick way to put that out there and evaluate your idea because you got all these assumptions. Is a virtual talent show going to work in
yes.
this environment, et cetera? And you're able to help her. And you walked her through every step of the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it was really about the talent show experience itself. What makes this so cool? And it's not the tech, it's like the whole experience, the customer experience, and all of that uniqueness, this kind of idea that she created which has never been done before. So nobody had experienced this. And they're
Yeah,
like,
you're right. I've never
so,
seen a virtual talent show. So,
yeah,
okay.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
So some more examples. So another example, another one of my clients, she also a full-time working mom. Okay. She thought, okay, she couldn't hire developers. It was too costly for her app idea. She wanted to create like a dating app for Muslim singles. Okay. And so she was told then, okay, well, she's got to learn how to code. And she spent like tons of money on a coding boot camp. And after 1 year, like she could barely write like, a couple lines of code. I'm like, and so she was still like at square one, right?
She spent a year learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And she could barely just get like a simple website up. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, we don't need any of this. Okay. And so then, so what she did instead to validate her idea was just like use Google Forms to collect the profiles of like the singles, right? And then she created a group online dating sort of like experience. And then she facilitated that. And then people like, matched up whoever matched up in that group dating environment, because that worked really well for Muslim singles, right? And so that's all she had to do to start validating it and getting the customers who again loved it, so that's that example. And then actually, so I got two more really cool examples. Actually, I got so many, but I'm just going to focus on two. So I want to go back to my own example for this current business, right?
Sure.
So when I was thinking, okay, you know what, like when I was in my first business, like so many people who were looking for the tech talent didn't actually really understand what they were building, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I saw the opportunity, right? And like, okay, people need help with trying to figure out what they're actually building, and there wasn't really anything out there that was like, satisfying that problem. So I'm like, so I wanted to get into then the ed tech space with like a course and coaching. And so here's what's interesting. So like I had my methods that worked and I was going to apply to the new space, but I'm like, let me just first talk to the ed tech industry experts. Okay. And I'm like, and they all gave me the worst advice. I'm like, whoa. Okay. They were like, you need to pay, tons of money on these like professional looking videos. You need to create this super cool, like animated slides, custom animated slides. You need to like even create your own custom app to deliver your courses. And if you're lucky, you might get like $500 per person who signs up for your course. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go down this path again because now I was familiar. Sure. I'm like, I'm just going to apply. I'm like, I don't need to listen to them. I'm just going to apply what I learned to this new business. And just by having authentic, real conversations with customers, I was able to get my first customers and make my first 10K within 60 days. And wow. Yeah. And get this, Ed, I had no like website, no like app. I hadn't even created my program yet. I just had like an idea in the head. But I knew my value proposition. That was the key, right? Sure. I knew my value proposition and I knew how to have those authentic conversations. And get this, they paid in the first phone call like $2,000 to $3,000 per sale. Yeah, not the $500 per course where I need all this other stuff. So wow, and that was the first version of my program, right? But yeah. Now let me just say. So what I hear, and this is something that if you spend office hours with me, you'll hear me talk about the difference between first principles thinking and analogy-based thinking. The analogies, the people who've been there, done that, will tell you all the stories of how it's going to work, etc., and then make you say, well, because it's happened this way before, it's going to happen the same way again.
but you take a first principles approach. I'm going to go talk right to the user, and I got a value proposition. I'm going to test it, etc. And for a Bootstrap founder, 10K is game-changing money.
Yeah.
Like, the best investor in the world is going to be your revenue, right?
Yes.
It just puts you in such a healthy spot. So you are like, okay, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, I'm not gonna do that again. So you applied these lessons to yourself.
Yes.
On the second. And so this is repeatable. You just proven that this is a system that you could just, keep doing, rinse and repeat.
Exactly, right?
Okay.
So I did it for 2 businesses for myself. And then the last customer case study I want to share with you, right, is one of my latest business clients, right? So I've recently started taking on some more business clients, established business owners, and he had already spent probably over 6 figures on building his app, and he has a handyman franchise. Okay. And the app is barely a booking app, right? And it's, and they spent 3 years and barely didn't have any customers come through. So didn't really do anything for their business. And I'm like, plus a booking app is something standard. There's not even anything
these
to
days.
it.
Oh yeah.
So I, have come in and I'm like, what is, you've been in business, and this is someone who's been in business for over 20 or maybe even 30 years. Okay. So this is what I do. I'm like, what is your secret sauce or something amazing that you're doing, right, that no other handyman, whether it be Handy, right, that what everybody knows about, or Angie's List, or whatever, all these other big startups, right, what are you doing that no one else is doing, right? And so why are people still coming to you to this day, right? And so then we pulled out a few things, right? So one is he had created his own handyman certification program,
okay,
to vet their handyman. I'm like, do your customers know that? Or I'm like, he's like, no, this is just internal knowledge. I'm like, this needs to get out there.
Sure.
To start bringing in the other customers to show your 35-point vetting system, because people want pre-vetted handyman, and they want to know how you're vetting them to then, so they don't have to do it so much, right? So there's that. But here's the other piece, right, is because they offered a concierge service, just how I did for my tech talent stuff, right? A lot of people, when they're looking for handyman, they don't know what type of handyman that they need, right? And based on whatever project they got, right? Whether it's just, someone who's a plumber versus someone who needs to renovate a bathroom versus someone who needs to build a whole residential home, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why people are still calling him and his call center for that. And then I'm just like, what you can do is just do a text-based solution, right? So, because that was also what was discovered from when I showed him how to do the customer discovery calls, because he had never done that.
Okay.
And then that's what people were saying. They want a text-based solution. And I had already proposed that as well. I'm like, now it's proof that they are. And so now people are texting, so he doesn't miss those opportunities. And he's also texting the advice that they would give in terms of the handyman or project or whatever the job that they would do on a phone call through text. And this is already going on. And this is huge because, I don't know if you've heard of WorkStream, right? But it's a new startup. They came up with a text-based solution for recruiting,
Gotcha.
But yeah. And they've raised now, I think Series B, $40 million. So this, it seems simple, but this is huge. So, and that's all he needed to do. And it's already a success, and it was so easy to implement.
I can imagine him saying, "Oh, Aliya, how come I didn't meet you like, a year or 2 years before? I would have saved six
Yeah.
figures and a
Oh
lot
my
of
God.
pain and heartache."
He said exactly that word
Yeah,
for word.
yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
I get
So,
that comment a lot from founders. So, and again, I love, I just can't express enough. This is the reason I was so excited when we first talked and when we
yeah,
met. I just can't express enough that I hope I'm going to make my personal mission for everybody to listen to everything that you have to say so they avoid those mistakes of spending six figures, their life savings and their hard-earned money, and just that the mindset. So let's talk about that. Let's wrap it up and then close because
yes,
there's so much to chew on. You
yes,
said something very interesting to me when we
yeah,
met. You said most of your work, I thought you were going to help people with tech, right? Like your code free app launch, you're going to help them with all the applications that are code free, et cetera. But you
yeah.
said 70, 80%
Mhm.
of your work has to do with mindset.
Yes.
So tell us what you told me and explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for early stage entrepreneurs, people who've never done a business before, and or who've never even been in tech, right? Like the mindset issues are the number one issues that are preventing people from moving forward, and nobody is addressing that in the tech startup world.
Mm,
Because I've removed every barrier. So they can't say to me, oh, I need all this expensive technology or code, because that barrier has been crushed,
sure,
right?
sure,
And, the business, like, avenue or whatever they're trying to do, I mean, that's been sorted as well. So I'm like, the only thing that's left is the mindset, right? And so and this is, I think, part of the reason why people, just aside even from my own customers, like why other people are so focused on the technology and the product, because they're suffering from perfection paralysis, where they
mm,
think they need to get the perfect product out and want to give that first good, perfect impression to get those customers, when that is not the case.
sure.
And people are just doing anything and everything to avoid having conversations with customers. And that's what happened with me, as because I'm a techie. I'm like, I don't need to talk to customers. Like, I know what they're thinking. I did a survey. I could be like a customer, whatever, all these, or talking to whatever customers one-on-one is a waste of time, all these things.
Yeah,
I'm like, no, you have to have those real conversations with customers. And you don't have to help get over that mindset. You don't have to think about, oh, how can I make a sale with this, right? It's not about that.
yeah,
If you just focus on trying to solve a problem and build a relationship, with those customers and develop that trust and all of that, then they'll just easily convert into paying customers if they are happy with your solution. That's it.
absolutely. Don't chase the sale. Don't chase
Yeah,
money. Chase the problem, and
yeah,
everything. The sales and the money will chase you if you
yeah,
legitimately go out and have something unique to solve
yeah,
that problem for them. And you can't get
yeah,
there until you get out of your own way a lot of times and go actually have these legitimate, authentic, empathetic
yeah.
conversations.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
So you
So that,
coach these founders on how to do this, even if they might be kicking and screaming and I'm scared and all these things. You really are a coach.
yes, that's why it's such an important part of the program, to help them just break any of these mindset blockers that are in the way, whether it be whatever fears there are, whatever imposter syndrome they're feeling, whatever perfection paralysis, like whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one, no one is helping these early stage entrepreneurs in the tech startup world so much with their mindset. And so that's one of the unique things I've brought into my program.
I love it. We're very fortunate that we're going to be working together. And
Yeah.
yeah, how many founders do I know that would rather pay money? thousands of dollars for Google AdWords or something like that, then, pick up the phone or say, can I do a customer discovery interview with you, et
Yes.
cetera. So I think this is a very important message. Okay.
Yes.
So here's the last question. So people are watching this. What's the first step? Let's say the first step, obviously, I'm going to say contact Aliya and, get involved. But if, let's just say they can't contact you or, something like that, and they have to do this themselves,
Yeah.
right? What would you say is the first step for them to do to start on this journey of building this MVP without the investors, without the technology, coders and the marketing, et cetera? What's the first step?
Yeah. Like there's two steps that kind of go hand in hand, right?
Okay.
So first is like, when I showed you in my diagram, clarify your app idea, right?
Okay.
Getting crystal clear in terms of like, what is the painful problem you're trying to solve? Who are your ideal target customers? What is your unique solution? Just even those pieces. There's even more, but like that, right?
Sure.
But tied with that in the first step, is really actually understanding your why and purpose. And
Okay.
yeah, and making sure. So I call this actually my get paid model, is to align to make sure your purpose and app idea are aligned, right? So hence the acronym there, right? Because so many times, this is the other important thing. So many times people chase just an opportunity that they're not passionate about.
Gotcha.
And they're not even skilled in. And they lose interest like very fast and chasing the money as opposed to choosing something that they're actually passionate about, that they have also the skills in, and that there is also a market for, like all of these things. And so that's all of that really goes hand in hand.
So you're saying the alignment is absolutely critical, which again, nobody's saying this, right? People don't really address this. They just get into, let's build the perfect tech stack. Let's start top of the pyramid, right? So you're saying get these two aligned, and that's the first step.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because when you know your why, like Simon Sinek says,
Yeah.
that will be your driving force and provide that intrinsic motivation or inspiration, right? To keep going and not give up, as opposed to trying to depend on external motivation. This will come from within.
Which is vital if you're going to go through changing your mindset, talking to customers, customer discovery, the rejection that potentially could come from all that. And when things get hard, especially if you're a solo founder, so really being able to tap into that intrinsic, who you are, my why, that's going to be absolutely key. You can get that aligned, then you've got the foundation for everything else that you're going to do if we work with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough. This has been illuminating on so many levels, also very validating and affirming to everything that we believe in. We're trying to build in our community-based accelerator for founders. So I look forward to spending more time with you, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of positive response from this. So thanks for sharing, Aliya.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ed.